Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is my November 2022 reading wrap-up. If you're not already aware, I do weekly entertainment wrap-ups of everything I read, watch, and listen to, but today we're just talking about the books. I'm going to start with my nerdy hardcore stats and charts and then get into what I read. Also, I put chapter markers in all of my videos, so if you need to go back to be like, wait, who was the author on that one book? Or you need to skip over something because you haven't read it yet, not that I actually give all that many spoilers, you can do that. All of that is down below. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, now is a very good time to do that. You can also hit that bell notification so you might actually be notified when I upload. In November, I read 10 books for a total of 3,180 pages, which is, I think, the lowest amount of books I've ever read in a month, and is a little bit wild to me considering next week is the Queer Lit Readathon, and I plan on reading 10 books that week. That takes into account converting audiobook minutes to pages, so 1,098 of those pages were actually about 29 hours of audio. The age breakdown for these books was 6 adult books and 4 YA books. I read 8 novels, 1 anthology, and 1 graphic novel. This month I read 3 contemporaries, 2 fantasies, 2 romances, and 1 each of historical fiction, mystery thriller, and non-fiction. If you adjust by page count, not much changes. Unlike most months, very few of these books were from the library, and about half were some form of free to me. I read 3 audiobooks, 3 paperbacks, 2 ebooks, and 2 hardcovers. The biggest chunk of my books were in the 300 to 399 pages range, and everything was published in the last 5 years. The majority of these books were written by female authors, and the majority of the protagonists followed suit. In terms of setting, the US continues to dominate this craft, followed by Indonesia, other worlds, the UK, and Canada. In terms of diversity of subject matter, most of these books were queer and everything had some form of representation. In terms of star ratings, this month I had 1 3.5 star read, 6 4-star reads, 1 4.5 star read, and 2 5-star reads. Let's start with the lowest rated read and work our way up to the highest, shall we? First on this list is my graphic novel, which was actually sent to me from the author because she actually lives where I live, and that is Softboiled by Maas. Going into this, I assumed it was historical fiction taking place in Victoria, BC, and it makes a lot of sense as to why I thought that, because when you start this, it's a hard-boiled detective just at the end of their rope, they're going to be losing their job, and it switches pretty quickly into realizing that yes, this person is losing their business, however, their business is an escape room that has to do with kind of the noir detective themes. One of the coolest things for me is that this was set where I live, so I could tell some of the landmarks and the locations, and that was really interesting for me. Another aspect about this that I really loved is this is a queer comic. Our main character is, I believe, a lesbian. I think it said lesbian on Paige, but either way, she is a queer woman. She's in a relationship with another woman, and something happens there. And despite the fact that she's not an actual detective, a mystery happens that she has to solve. I really enjoyed reading this. I read this in one sitting. The art style is a little bit less polished than you usually see, but that didn't really detract from my enjoyment of this. Garbage truck, why you gotta make all the noise? Moving on to the 4-star reads, the first one being the anthology that I read this month, and that is Love That Story by Jonathan Van Ness. This is a follow-up to Over the Top, which was their memoir, and this is just more essays and more stories about their life and actually reflecting on writing that memoir, because a lot of very personal, vulnerable details came out in that, and people chose to kind of pick and choose what they actually reported about it and talked about how it was just full of doom and gloom when a lot of it was actually very, very joyous. There's just some things that have happened in their life that aren't the best things to happen to a person. There were also essays about current politics as well as different things that Jonathan just loves, and I just really enjoyed being back inside his head and having more stories told by him. I also very much appreciated that she went into some details about her time doing hair, because that is a big part of her life, and all of the details of being a hairstylist and what that generally entails, because you usually rent a seat, you're not paid a minimum wage, so if people just don't pay you or they don't show up or things like that, a lot of the money that goes into the supplies is taken directly out of your profit, and that really sucks if people are not being the nicest towards you. There was also an essay in here about his love of the series written by Rowling when he was growing up, and how he is incredibly disappointed about how that author is treating trans folk. Also, another really fascinating essay had to do with the AIDS safety net that is particularly good in California, to the point when he found out he was HIV positive that he actually immediately moved to California. All in all, a lot of interesting stuff in here. If you're a fan, you will enjoy this. Next, we have a book that I won in, I believe, either an Instagram or Twitter giveaway directly from the author, and that is Heartbreak Homes. Fun fact, this author is Canadian and is also the co-owner of a bookstore in Nova Scotia, so the next time I'm on the East Coast, I'm going to have to try to find it and drop in and say hi. Heartbreak Homes has 3 different point of view characters, and all of them end up at this same party on this estate that's an Arrested Development. Basically, people put a lot of money into building these homes, and then only one home was ever built, and then that company went bankrupt or something happened with that. While this party is going on, something unthinkable happens, and then these 3 characters are individually trying to figure out what happened that night and how to survive in some cases, depending on their particular circumstances. I really enjoyed how varied these characters were and how there were little connections between a couple of them, but they didn't really know each other beforehand, and how they all kind of came together near the end to basically solve what had happened. This is also one of those books that's pretty good at keeping you on your toes and making you wonder who done it, and I really appreciate that. Next, we have The Library of the Unwritten by A.J. Hackwith. This is the first in a trilogy, and I am excited to continue reading these books because I ended up really enjoying all of these characters, and I just kind of want to see how their adventure continues. This is also the first book for the Eat, Shit, and Live book club, which is a book club that is hosted by Bear, and we will actually be doing a live show for this book sometime this weekend. I think we've decided on Friday, so check out their channel to figure out when that's happening, or if it's already happened by the time you're watching this, you can probably go back and watch the live stream, assuming it's still available. The Library of the Unwritten has, I believe, 4 different point of view characters, but the first one we meet is this woman named Claire, and she is the librarian of the Library of the Unwritten, which is in hell. This is a place where all of the books that have not been written by their authors basically just hang out and exist, and sometimes the books actually sort of come to life in the form of one of their characters. This is actually something that happens near the beginning of this book, forcing Claire to go back to Earth to track down this character and bring the book back to hell. However, when she and a new recruit and her assistant librarian go to do that, they are intercepted by an angel and a scuffle happens, and then there is a whole giant adventure that they have to go on to try to rectify some situations. When we picked this for the book club, we thought it was much more of a horror as opposed to a dark fantasy and adventure, which is definitely what this ended up being. It is totally an adventure story over everything else. Of course, it takes place in hell, so that probably misled us into thinking it was going to be super, super dark. And although it does have those dark aspects to it, it is a little bit more lighthearted than you would find in a horror. That being said, I ended up really enjoying it. I'm pretty sure that Bear ended up really enjoying it as well, although they had kind of an up and down the whole time, and I'm very excited to talk to them about it. And overall, I just really enjoyed how this went to various different places and showed completely different cultures and what they think about death and different things you would have to do to be able to continue on in this journey. I just very much enjoyed it, and I'm very interested to see where it goes from where we left off. Similarly, this month I also read The Library of the Dead. If you've never been here before, yes, I like bookish books, so if you have a book with library in the title, I would like to read it, please. This is a book that is set in Edinburgh, Scotland, which is my favorite city in the world, so I was immediately drawn to that. However, this is set in kind of a dystopic future where society is breaking down a little bit, and some people can talk to ghosts and actually use this as a business model. It's actually something they do for their money. The protagonist of this book, Ropa, is one of these people. I believe she's only 14 years old at the time of this novel, but she basically works as a messenger between talking to ghosts and then relaying messages to their loved ones, assuming that one or the other can pay for the service. However, one day when she's doing this, somebody is trying to get her attention, and she talks to this ghost, and the ghost says that her son has been missing since before she died, and she needs to know what happened because he hasn't passed over, so where is he? And she's like, okay, but like that doesn't pay me anything, you can't pay me. And because her grandmother tells her that it's the right thing to do, she basically ends up having to put her clients on hold so she can figure out this mystery. In the course of figuring out this mystery, she meets a new friend, she has another friend that actually has some secrets that she ends up slightly manipulating, and then she finds her way into the Library of the Dead, which is a whole underground society. And I know exactly where they're talking about getting into this library because I used to run ghost tours through that cemetery, so exactly where they're talking about, I'm like, oh yeah, I know exactly where that is. I've been there before. Not to the library, to the place where they say the entrance to this library is. I've been to both of the locations where there's entrances to this library. Again, this is another one that's the first in a series, and I would be interested to see where it goes from here as well. The next book on this list is something a little bit different, and that is a romance called I'm in Love with Mothman by Paige Lavoie. This is a book that actually comes out, I believe, December 1st. So if I get this edited in time, it comes out today. This is also the first in a series, and after reading this, I really want the next book to already be out, but obviously that is not the case. This book is about a girl named Heather. Online she goes by Honeybee Latte, and she's an influencer, and her mom was actually one of the OG mommy bloggers, so basically all of her life has been online. Something happens and she reaches a breaking point where she just kind of wants to log off and never go back online again, and when she makes this decision, she, spur of the moment, buys a cabin in the woods in Ohio and decides to move. Her mom is not super jazzed about this, but she's a grown adult and she can do what she wants. So she moves from Florida to Ohio, to this very small area. She starts making friends there, but one of these friends in particular has a really weird hobby of monster hunting. And you can probably guess which monster is going to show up based on the fact that he's in the title of the book. Yes, this is a romance between Heather and Mothman, who she calls Moth. And although I have said in the past that I find it kind of weird that when we have a monster type romance, it's always between a beautiful woman and a monster, and it's never like a beautiful guy or a guy in general and a monster. And that's something I've always thought is a little bit weird. However, I didn't care. This was so sweet and lovely, and I enjoyed how these characters connected and how goofy they were, and just the mystery of why he's there. Like, I didn't know a lot about Mothman as the myth before this. I actually ended up watching a video about it while I was reading this book, just spur of the moment. It happened to be one of the things that was recommended to me, and I went, oh, okay, yeah, I guess I should get to know some of the stuff. Because outside of knowing the myth of there's a moth the size of a man, I didn't really know like what he had been reported to have done, so it was kind of good to get that background. However, to read this book, you don't need that background. Everything you need to know is explained. This was a good time, and Paige, I need the next book now, please. The historical fiction book I read this month was Last Call at the Nightingale. This is historical fiction that takes place in the Prohibition era in New York, and our main character is of Irish descent. I believe she's like first generation American, but her mother was Irish, and I don't know if we know anything about her father. And she and her sister live in this very small flat. They are seamstresses by day, but by night she likes to go to the club. She likes to get a little bit of that giggle juice into her, and she loves dancing. However, one of these nights, her and her best friend go out into the alley for a smoke, and they find a corpse, and then she is caught up in trying to figure out what happened to this man. I had a lot of fun with this one because you could quite easily set a book in this time frame and have all the characters be really racist, or have all the characters be really homophobic, and yes, those things existed at the time. However, the characters that we're primarily focusing on will talk about those things, but we won't see it from the outside perspective of the people being racist and homophobic. We'll see it from the perspective of the people being like, yeah, I have to be careful because of these things, and these things have happened to me in the past, but it's not somebody who's against people talking about those people. It's about the people who are those things talking about their experiences, and that is a big difference for me, and I liked seeing that in this setting. Really early on, we know that Vivian likes to dance with both men and women. Also, her best friend is a waitress there, and she is a black woman, so we've got that representation. The main bartender that she interacts with all the time is also Chinese, so there's more than one type of BIPOC representation. And I do believe that we see some queer men from time to time in this club as well. This is just a fascinating time frame to have something set. This is also the first in a series, and just the way it ended off with a little hint of what she might come to learn in future books had me really hooked into wanting to read the next one. My 4.5-star book this month was A Scatter of Light by Malinda Lo. This is a contemporary book about this girl who at the end of her high school experience has a little bit of a rough go. Essentially, there is a graduation party and she's there and she decides to make out with this guy, and he takes some nude photos of her and posts them online. And because they're both over the age of 18, nobody really does anything about it, and he doesn't get in any trouble, but suddenly all of her summer plans have been canceled by her friend's parents because they feel that she is a bad influence. This means that instead of spending the summer on Martha's Vineyard with her friends before they all go off to college, she actually spends the summer in California with her grandmother. There she meets this group of queer friends, she makes some realizations about herself, and some very messy situations happen. I really enjoyed how messy this book was, because especially when you're this age and you're just trying to figure yourself out, not everything is picture perfect, and things do happen, and a lot happens in this book, and I really appreciated this book for doing that. There are tons of different types of discussions, and I was not emotionally prepared for a slight overlap with another book by Malinda Lo, which was Last Night at the Telegraph Club. There was a mention of characters from that book in this book, and I was just not prepared for that, and I believe I just about cried. If you're looking for messy queers or biracial representation because her father is white and her mother is Chinese, if you're looking for tough family relationships, if you're looking for a hard-hitting contemporary, this book has all of that. On to my 5-star books, and the penultimate book on this list, which is Well, That Was Unexpected by Jessie Q. Sutanto. This book is dual perspective, and we start out with Charlotte. Charlotte has decided that she wants to lose her virginity to the guy that she's dating right now, Bradley. She's decided she is ready to do this. However, when she decides that she is not quite ready, he is totally fine, he backs off, but her very protective mother walks in on them almost being in the deed. As a wonderfully dramatic overreaction, she decides to take her daughter to Indonesia for the summer, because that is where she's originally from and she's never gone back since she left. Our other perspective is George. Now, he is the only male heir to this giant billionaire company of his kind of time frame. He's got tons of cousins and all of this, and a lot of them work in the family corporations, because corporations, yes, they have tons of different family things. But as we meet him, he is having some alone time, and his father bursts in on him, and he closes the tab of what he was watching during that alone time, and there is a game playing in the background, so his father thinks that he was having this alone time while looking at badgers and gnomes, and decides that he needs to find his son a real human girlfriend. From there, we have this ridiculous situation where Charlotte's mom and George's dad end up catfishing each other as their kids to try to get them to meet so that they can date respectable human beings. This book had me laughing out loud at points. It also had me yelling at characters at points. It's so good that nobody was home while I was reading this, because I was just screaming at this book every once in a while, because there are a lot of characters that need to learn to mind their own business or to not slut shame or things like that, and my goodness. This went in some directions that I did not see coming. I ended up really loving some of the side characters as well. And honestly, after reading all of the delicious descriptions of coffee, I really want to try Indo coffee at some point in my life. It sounds amazing and varied, and I just want to try it. Especially because it sounds like it's the type of coffee that you can have without having to put milk or a dairy product into it, and I'm all about that, because currently my stomach hates me if I do that. So if it's not too acidic and it tastes amazing just by itself, I want it. The final book on this list, and my favorite book I read this month, is Thank You for Listening by Julia Whelan. If audiobooks are your thing, I would highly recommend you listen to this book as an audiobook. I know that that's not accessible to everyone, however, if that's something you do anyway, listening to this audiobook is wonderful because firstly, the narrator is the author of the book. Secondly, she is an audiobook narrator, like that is what she was doing before she wrote this book, and I'm sure she is still doing because she's incredibly talented. And thirdly, this is a book about the business of being an audiobook narrator. So it's audiobook industry all the way down. However, this is also a romance that has tried to use as many romance tropes as possible, but do them in ways that it's not overpowering, and it's just the characters being like, well, this is kind of ridiculous, but I guess we're in this situation, and it all feels so completely genuine and lovely, and I just really enjoyed it. Our main character in this book, like I said, is a woman who is an audiobook narrator. She used to do romance books when she first started out, but under a completely different name, and I know somebody who has done this, so I know that this is definitely a thing. However, when she moved into other genres, she started using her own name professionally. She's actually won some awards for her work, but this is not the path she thought she would be on when she was going to Juilliard. At Juilliard, she met her best friend, who is now currently becoming a big household household name actress. And she was also a screen actress up until an accident she had a few years ago. That's somewhat of a mystery for a lot of this book, so I'm not going to tell you exactly what she went through, but because of what she went through, she is disfigured and has decided to transition into being an audiobook narrator, which worked out really well for her because obviously she has this brilliant acting background and she does a lot with tone and breath and that type of thing, which makes her audiobook narrating just so wonderful. As it turns out, this very big author that she used to narrate for has passed, and she has this project that will only go forward in audio form if she decides to be the female narrator. It will also only go forward if the male narrator will be this very up-and-coming guy who's done like 400 books at this point, who if I'm remembering correctly, his name is Brock McKnight, which is definitely not a real name. They figure that this is going to be a very big project for both of them, so they decide to both do it, and they start corresponding back and forth about different things to do with the project, which turns a little bit flirty. When I told you before that there are tons of tropes in this book, my goodness, I'm not even going to try to name them because it's just so fun to see them come up. I 100% absolutely loved this romance. I loved how much it talked about the genre. Obviously, I'm a big fan of bookish books, so this fits right into that category. I really enjoyed the type of banter they had. I really enjoyed the emotional investment into the certain things that happened and the reason why everything was happening. I just very much enjoyed it. If you like romance, or you like audiobooks, or you like characters that are just incredibly heartfelt and interesting, this is a book to pick up. If you want to hear me talk more about these books, or other books for that matter, the playlist for my weekly entertainment wrap-ups is always linked down below. If you've read any of these, or you're planning on reading any of these, please let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment, but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!